thing you've reported is that the president is the one who ordered that investigation be done.
It is the president who called the DCI Kinoti.
It was on paper. It was on paper today.
Yeah, so when I had that yesterday,
it was on standard.
Should this story be a dead one by now in terms of where it's going, because it seems to end up an egg in face?
Hii maneno ya Ruto assassination kwangu mimi naona ni vizuri media kuongelea juu ya hiyo.
Kama wanahabari ningependa ya kwamba msiwe mnalenga mambo hayo sana.
And we asked people around the country whether they feel that particular story on the assassination attempt of DP Ruto deserves the attention. And yes, we'll be having two guests, actually three. We're hoping to get the third one in studio in the next few. We have John Gashie. He is a veteran journalist, has been a contributor here on Press Pass in previous episodes, as well as Dr. Peter Kimani, who has been also a contributor here on Press Pass, but is a contributor continuously as a lecturer at the Aga Khan University. So let's join in the conversation. Before we get the views from the people, the person that we actually have been hoping to get as well on the conversation is Wayu Amuli, an editor of the Saturday Nation, to give us a contribution to the topics today. Something else we'll be looking at is the back and forth between Tanzania and Kenya, given the the Starehe MP's sentiment on foreign traders in downtown. You know what that has ended him up in, and he has been in custody and should be out on Wednesday. That is Charles Njagwa. We'll be talking about that in the second part. But first, let's talk to this particular issue, and that is the alleged attempt at the life of the Deputy President, William Ruto. And in this past week, since last Monday, in fact, when the four CSs who were alleged to have been at the center of this particular plot turned up at the DCI to say that no, they're not part of this in any way and would not record a statement until the Deputy President, who is a supposed victim, files a formal complaint, which he hasn't to date. Well, they turned up and it's been getting a lot of attention, and to date we're asking if this is a story that is as good as dead from the very beginning. And there has been some responses and pronouncements by various leaders, and we'll start with what was on JKL, that is with Elgeyo Marakwet, Senator Murkomen, who had this to say in terms of his understanding of this particular story.
You know, the reports I read in the newspaper, because I have not discussed this with the DP or the president,
right,
but the reports I've seen you've reported is that the president is the one who ordered that investigation be done.
I think, Ken, I heard Mheshimiwa Swero saying clearly that it is the president who called the DCI Kinoti.
It was on paper. It was on paper today.
Yeah, so when I had that yesterday,
it was on standard today.
Standard. Now, when I had that yesterday, I decided to call the president, and the president was very Parliament of Embakasi's constituency, and I'm telling you, I called the president, and Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta said clearly that he is not interested in sideshows.
Well, that's what some of the leaders have had to say in the past week, and I'm not saying that is on record because they are the formal or official word on this particular matter. Of course, they're investigating agencies, and given the latest reporting, they say they're going on with their probe on this particular matter, and it seems to be heading back to the office of the Deputy President, where a couple of aides, close aides to the Deputy President, are said to have been the origin of a particular letter. If we can look at it right now, this is what I'm looking at on my laptop right here. If my director can give you a look as well. This is what started this whole story, and it was leaked to the media 2 weeks ago before it really became a big story, and it is a story headed Matters of Grave Concern, apparently with a report that there has been a plan to get the life of the Deputy President. So first of all, my two panelists who are here now, as we wait for the third, they have had a chance to look at this, and I'll just ask them straight up, if they were editors today and in charge of the desk to report on this particular story. I'll start with Hugh Daktari. What would you do with this particular story?
Oh, well, thanks, Mark.
You'd first laugh.
Yeah, I would first laugh it off.
Yes.
Know that it's laughable. I mean, the claims are pretty grave, but I would have laughed it off.
Yes.
As some form of joke that lawyers will call dead on arrival. You said as good as dead,
yes.
But this will have been properly dead in my estimation.
Right.
Because my experience with news reporting is that you have to be able to corroborate every claim that's being made. So my first response would be, where was the letter originating from? John and I just had a quick glance and were laughing at the recycled paper that was printed.
Yes, what we're looking at right now.
I used to print this important information. So we know we are doing poorly as an economy, but I think we can afford some clean paper to write some grave concerns.
Especially if it's addressed to the president.
Yes, especially if it's addressed to the president.
Yes.
So I would have given it some time to verify the information before I go to town with any claim whatsoever. Yeah.
All right. And for you, in terms of at the face of it, if you were to get this and you're asked to follow up with this particular story as an editor?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. My first take would be, one, the allegations are serious and grave, but perhaps would I want to add fire to it by spreading the allegations without any fact or without a leg to stand on? And the first thing is to do verification, if I can, about the sources, about the authorities, and the people so allegedly to have been, the letter was addressed to.
Right.
And in this particular case, you're talking about a claim about somebody or a conspiracy to harm the deputy president, for that matter, and the people involved are quite senior and high up. I wouldn't second guess that, and joining in the fray is a very serious matter.
Yes.
So I would have to, one, establish as much as I can the veracity, the authorities, and independent sources. And in this case, you're talking about, there are the office of the president, indeed, the presidential communication.
Yes.
I think you have the cabinet secretary, so to speak,
yes,
in charge of this. And of course, we have the larger elephant in the room, the National Security Intelligence Service of this country. Indeed. So what am I saying? In view of the fake news phenomena, and the abuse that is going on, I would be hesitant and I would be overly cautious until I can establish the bona fides of the content.
Right. And right now where it's at in terms of verification of this particular story is the fact that it is heading back to the office of the deputy president himself in terms of the original authors of this particular letter, then pointing to a particular spin. But there is the aspect of response from the 4 CSs who went to the DCI last Monday. And so this is a story you cannot ignore. But in terms of the priority it was given, because of who it involves, the life of the deputy president. And in fact, in some of the reports here, you have some people would call this sensational, but like a response like this was on a Saturday edition of The Nation. Ruto murder plot claim could cause bloody chaos. Did we panic in any way to particularly give this particular story focus in any way?
For me, the story says nothing, really.
Nothing.
To date, it says absolutely nothing, because the deputy president is yet to make an official complaint about the threats being made on his life. Neither has the government responded directly as to the veracity of these claims. We haven't seen that yet. We have seen politicians commenting about it. What I would have done as a responsible editor would be a few things. Would be to contextualize history of assassinations in this country.
Yes.
And how they have manifested in the previous 50 years. Because I think editors are aware of the social history of the country. And you can see 1969, in July 1969, exactly 50 years ago, when Tom Mboya was assassinated, there was a wave across Central Province. And it's almost a replica of the memo that's being circulated right now.
When you say a wave, what do you mean? Just for those of us who are not...
Yeah, so the letter that we saw had three claims. That this meeting that was set up at Lamada Hotel was meant to galvanize the president's support around the Central Province. 1969, you had a similar fake news that was the community around Central Province and Mount Kenya, for that matter, was being galvanized to rally behind the president because there was a pull towards, Jaramogi and the Kenya People's Union, which was left-leaning, taking over the government.
Yes.
So you have an assassination that's committed by state operatives, and you have these. It was actually mass oathing of the Kikuyu to rally behind the president, and you can see the Lamada Declaration. The first point is galvanizing public support for the presidency. So it's point for point almost replication of the 1969 fake oathing that was going on in that region. Then you go to a decade later, 1978. So Mboya was seeking to succeed the president. So it's about the politics of succession. So 69, you have these momentum galvanizing the Central Province. 78, you have another momentum yet to succeed Kenyatta. And there was supposedly a faction within the police, the provincial police, to murder then Deputy President, Vice President Moi, from succeeding Kenyatta. And there was a claim that was splashed, by newspapers about some outfit called Ngoroko. Even a book was published by a journalist who was practicing, Joseph Karemi.
Yes.
So every decade you have a momentum built around these succession politics. So any editor who has this larger historical context can be able to sit back and say, wait a minute, what have we learned today that mirrors yesterday? Because that can point to the future. So put another way, we could have, or editors could have covered this story so differently by evoking the past to actually say, we don't seem to be learning from history because we are reenacting those shenanigans and they're not causing anybody any good.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can add on to that because you were also very active in the newsroom in terms of back in the past, and you were present and you were very active at that time, even the 78 time. And it amazes me. It's almost a perfect replica of what happened then.
Yeah.
Of course, I wasn't around, but now hearing about this, you almost want to step back and say, my God, this is egg and face to our media houses.
Yeah, I would say this, Mark. The manner this story has been handled raises a lot of very fundamental issues about media performance. It raises issues about ethics. It raises issues about agenda setting role. And it also raises issues of gatekeeping. What is the role of an editor? And perhaps to say what my colleague is saying, in 1976, between 1974 to 1978, there was a group that was led by the then Paul Ngei, and a lot of it was called Change the Constitution Group. And it went to town, creating all sorts of issues and questioning then Moi's credentials and what have you. And it only took the intervention of the then powerful Attorney General, Charles Jonjo, to encompass the death of a president is sedition. But treason. And that, to a large extent, kept that. But prior to that, again, we had an issue in 1975 when then Josiah Mwangi Kariuki disappeared And again, here, the nation at that particular time was used, and it had a headline that talked about the late JM found in, he was in Zambia. Well, in real fact, the body was still out in Ngong Hills. So has then the Kenyan media been abused and used? Yes. But have they learned the lesson? Indeed, we had a similar case about a coup, supposedly in Seychelles. And the coup then collapsed, and we had the mercenary. What I'm saying here is a question of how does the media guard itself against being hijacked or misused or abused to pursue a political agenda,
yes,
and to set an agenda and to create a false perception out there. Is it true that this letter in its entirety as it is constituted is a very serious allegation? But the media owes society not to fan rumors, not to engage in doublespeak unless they can verify. Because the media is supposed to be legacy media. It's not, we are not
scooping.
We are not scooping. The issue here is that the nation, indeed all media houses, operate with what we call clear editorial policy guidelines. And the policy guidelines are categorical. Before you publish a story of that magnitude, you have to, first of all, establish the sources, cross-check those sources, verify that, and finally be able to say that if it turned out the way it is, that if you're asked by your readers, you would tell your readers and your consumers that I did give it all. I was not in a hurry to give you half-baked stories. Because...
And can we say the same case, the same this case, that we give it our all?
That perhaps that's where I'm leading to. I do not then therefore think that there was sufficient cross-checking, quality control applied. And I think it's not, I think it's something that we are seeing within the media. And that the legacy media is slowly perhaps trying to compete with social media. It cannot be.
Right.
Because I think you have a higher threshold. We hold you to a higher calling. The nation talks about the truth and being timeless. Was the nation, or then the standard, setting the standards, or was the people? Did they do that? They didn't. What they did then, they wore their business issue of ratings. And you cannot have media. The media is not selling sausages, do you understand, or bread. It's talking about news.
Right.
If you want to compete about who is first in the market with the best spicy sausage, or meat for that matter, then get out of the kitchen.
Right.
That for me is the issue.
Okay. I'll probably just pause on that particular point. We're not in the business of selling sausages. That's a good point and a good thing for us to think about. And when we take this break, and when we can come back, we'll have the responses from several people from our audience who've been at the receiving end of this particular story and what they had to say about it. Stay with us.
Hii maneno ya Ruto assassination kwangu mimi naona ni vizuri media kuongelea juu ya hiyo, kwa sababu kila mtu is our deputy president, so media kuipea nafasi lazima waiongelee.
As a government should take concern, because so many cases have been enlightened through that, and we have seen what has happened to other leaders.
Kama wanahabari, ningependa ya kwamba msiwe mnalenga mambo hayo sana, muweze kulenga yale mambo ambayo yanaweza kuendelesha Wakenya, maana siasa iliisha mwaka wa 2017. Sasa tunatekana kuangalia sana yale malengo ya Jubilee manne yaweze kutimilika.
Ruto could have gone to the relevant security apparatus na report hiyo maneno, maana mimi pia ni mwananchi na in one way or another ninaweza kuwa ninahofia maisha yangu, lakini siendi kwa media, ninatumia polisi, maana hiyo ndio sheria.
What is making people, as I can say, a certain people not to look so much into it, and in fact not to believe, if I can put it, is that even the media itself, the information was brought, then up to now things are silent.
On the first time when this story was being aired out, there were mixed reactions. Like a number of people from these regions, they could believe that it was something true and legitimate. But if you look at other regions like Nyanza and all other regions, to them they were seeing this as just a mere propaganda.
Kama vile media imesema, sisi tulivyoelewa ni kwamba naibu wa rais alitoa ofisi yake ilisema kwamba maisha ya naibu wa rais ipo hatarini, na sisi kama wananchi tunajua sheria, tunajua kwamba kuna nyenzo ama kuna law procedures ambazo zitafuatwa ili kujua kama maneno haya kwa kweli ni za kweli ama ni uongo.
Hii maneno yote ya kusema naibu rais anataka kuuliwa ni siasa za mapema, na kulingana na mimi naweza nikasema hizo ni fununu tu. Hizo zote ni porojo. Sasa kusema kwamba eti kwamba anataka kumuua vice president, yule ni mtu ambaye ana security ya hali ya juu. Kwa hivyo wanaposema sisi wananchi kwa kawaida ni kwa kama kana kwamba kutoweka katika kiweweo.
Siasa tu. Wajua binadamu wakitaka jambo lake watafuta kiki. Sasa hiyo kutafuta kiki tu, hakuna kitu kingine. Sidhani kama waweza kufanywa kama hilo.
Assassination, it is a serious term. We are not supposed, we as a Kenyans, we have a lot of problems which is all over this country.
First of all, the life of every citizen in this country is guarded and guaranteed in our constitution. And as such, attempt on life of any citizen, whether the person of deputy president or any other person for that matter, should be treated with utmost seriousness.
Ninaonelea kwamba hizo siasa ziendelee kuenezwa kwa sababu wanahabari hao wako kazini, na pia jambo kama na hilo likitokea inafaa tukue tumeshajua ya kwamba ilikuwa imesemekana.
Ni vizuri vile media wanaendelea kufuatilia hiyo maneno, kwa sababu from the rumors we get the truth. Kwa sababu sasa kama barua ilionekana, ni vizuri ichunguzwe, ijulikane hiyo barua ilitoka wapi, na ndio ukweli upatikane.
We'll start with that last comment. From the rumors, you get the truth, that lady says. And there were other comments, and you've jotted them down. And that's why some people might argue a good thing the media did not ignore it. But did it deserve the focus that it got? I'll let you respond to what you managed to capture from the audience's responses.
I think Kenyans are very perceptive. As you heard, quite a number of them are saying the deputy president is one of the most guarded individuals in this country. So if his security will be violated, then what are the rest of us supposed to do? So put another way, ordinary Kenyans were not persuaded that this is a plausible plot. So if you know, a journalist who has a training to verify information, to trace back its source, to check whether this is adding up. I was just thinking, Just the kind of opportunities that the Nation, the Standard or the Star, the People, whoever else had to verify this information, they ignored completely all the other agencies of government that should have been responsible for this story, the intelligence community. So are we going really to publish headlines on the basis of a faint, unreadable page and splash it today, tomorrow, and the day after? So we need to understand the stories first. That's what I think the audience was saying. We need to understand these stories first before we send them out, because it made no sense to a majority of Kenyans.
Right. And Bwana Gashie, we spoke earlier and we talked about the motives that could be behind such a letter and such an agenda. And one of them could be just to test the message in the public forum or with the public and how it responds. With what you've heard, would you say the person, if there is a person who's behind this, choreographing this whole thing, has actually succeeded in getting it to the masses?
Perhaps, but there is perhaps a dead end to this. The public has not bought the scam. And as you had,
but there are some who say where there's.
But just a moment. If you were to do on the number, you had about six people. And I think it's only one lady. All the others said, moja ilikuwa porojo. The other one said this was seeking sympathy. The other one, the other one is siasa. And the other one said he couldn't even believe that you could talk about assassinating the deputy vice president, him enjoying that kind of high-level protection. Because indeed, there is a specific force unit within the General Service Unit that whose mandate is to protect the presidency, including, of course, the deputy president. But having said that, what was the intention here? Was it to plant doubts? Was it to set an agenda? Was it to seek sympathy? Was it to spin the story? All those are possibilities. And as you said, there's what we call trial ballooning, testing the waters. But, and as I said, the media has a higher social calling than to be used to do testing the waters. And that's, and if, as I said here, you get the license to do this. These frequencies that we are using, the nation, these are national resources. You only have a license. Do you understand? These are national resources. You are doing this on behalf of the public here. There's a higher social calling. As I said, it's not sausages. Get that. And until you get that clearly, it's nice if you could sell as much sausages as you could. But remember, we have a public interest here. Now, what was a public interest here? Creating panic, creating anxiety, creating despondency? Is that really the job of the media? No. But is the media therefore responsible? Having said that, flip it on its head. Suppose it was true. The ramifications will be dire. And therefore, on the two sides of the coin, it could be an attempt to manipulate, but it could also be true. And that is now where the cardinal rule of journalism is to cross-check, cross-check the sources. And because until you do that, then if you come out that it is true or it is not false, then you tell your readers, your consumers that the nation, the Standard, the Kenyan media, we are not Facebook. We are not Twittering here. What we are saying, we've done this through. It's not a rumor. So did you engage in spreading a rumor? Might be.
Yes. And just, Daktari, just before you respond, because we're talking about are we verifying, are we checking with the sources, the important people, the subjects within this particular story. And there was an attempt. If you remember, the Deputy President called for a press briefing at his Karen residence over the week, and this was particularly on an FGM function. But I know he was clear that people would ask, because there was a great response in terms of the attendance of the journalists there, and there was a battery of journalists. Amongst them was our very own Kennedy Mureithi, who attempted to get a direct response from the Deputy President. This is how it played out.
A battery of journalists flocked to the DP's current offices expectant.
Is your life in danger, sir? And have you... Sir?
They had hoped to hear the DP's response on the ongoing debate over an alleged plot to kill him. The DP has successfully managed not to discuss the matter, at least publicly, but it's public knowledge that the issue has added firewood to an already burning fire within the Jubilee Party. The letter that set in motion these events could be fake, and investigators are now looking into a specific direction. Who could have authored the letter and for what purpose? Reports have it that some officers at the DP's office, especially bloggers, are a target in the investigations. Wednesday, State House, through its spokesperson Kanzedena, confirmed that such a letter was never received. It has also emerged that Wednesday evening, the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, questioned Interior PS Karanja Kibisho, who has been named as a person of interest. Kennedy Muredhi, NTV.
One of the examples of the stories that were done over the week following up the developments there. And as it was going on, I cut you short. Sure. You can respond, and then Bwana Gashie to this and more.
Right. So that story illustrates the kind of pointlessness of this story. You have the man of the moment,
yes,
the man whose life is in danger.
Supposedly,
Supposedly. And then he's asked a question and waves it off. And then the journalist goes back to the letter, says it could be fake. So it's a circus, Mark. This is what Kenyans are being treated to, entertainment in place of information. Mm-hmm. Because it's very entertaining to just have a cock and bull story told over and over again. But the story said the State House confirmed they had not received any letter. So whatever was in circulation did not originate from the office, mm-hmm, or hadn't been delivered to them. So why weren't these facts verifiable days earlier?
Yes.
I mean, the State House hasn't moved. It's still a kilometer away. I mean, it's the kind of lethargy that I'm experiencing consistently in news coverage. News organizations have guidelines.
Yes.
You have to have some threshold. Maybe 3 or more sources corroborating any particular news incident.
Right.
So here, NTV is telling us, we too don't believe this story. It could be fake. So what are you telling Kenyans?
Mm-hmm. And Bwana Gashie?
Yeah, I would say that there was an attempt to create a perception, to set an agenda. And the problem was the media played into it.
Okay.
And why did the media play into it? Is it lack of skills? I don't think so. Was it lack of professionalism? I would hope not. Because if then that were the case, then we're in serious trouble. Mm-hmm. But the bigger question was, were perhaps some people enjoying this? Because let me put it this way. The media sometimes also enjoys creating drama because it's a very nice copy. Right? Sometimes the end justifies the means, mm-hmm, and then you perpetuate that same. Am I saying that the media shouldn't have looked into this? They certainly should have. And as my colleague is saying, there is a clear-cut threshold, and of which a story of such a magnitude cannot then be rushed.
Okay.
Just because possibly you would be scooped. I don't think the nation, the whole essence of the Daily Nation is not to be scooped. Nation has been scooped many a times. Mm-hmm. Nation has scooped other media houses many a times. The bigger question, is Nation credible? Is Nation reliable? Is Nation legacy media? Mm-hmm. Can you believe what the Nation says? I think the Nation media consumers buy or consume your product on one cardinal aspect, that there is a lot of effort made to tell the truth as approximately as possible.
Right.
It is not how soon you hit the streets.
Right.
That, and once the nation loses that, then it might as well go into the business of selling sausages.
Back to the sausages again.
Yeah.
Let's close this particular story. As an editor today in a newsroom, How would you advise the direction it takes, this particular story?
Hold it until you can verify.
Okay.
We say in journalism, we say find out or leave it out.
All right. Simple. To you?
Yeah. I couldn't have put it any better. That's why he's teaching journalism. And then the point is, yeah, find out or leave it out.
Yes.
For me, I wouldn't. It's a very serious allegation, and I would have applied myself sufficiently with the seriousness it deserved, not the casualness in which it was treated with by people perhaps who owed us a more serious duty.
Yes.
Social responsibility and public interest.
All right. And we hope that we will pursue that line in terms of giving it the seriousness that it deserves and not be taken for a spin in an attempt like this, and verify if indeed there's something to look into this particular story, verify the allegations that are being made here, and call it out. If it's fake, and if it's true, then really pursue the investigating organizations and agencies to get to the bottom of this. We've spoken and touched about an issue of, testing the waters, testing the public sentiment on a particular matter. And there's another issue that came up this particular week, and that was on the divide, on the fairness or lack thereof of the trade industry, especially downtown. This was when Starehe Member of Parliament Charles Njagua made some strong sentiments. This was 2 weeks ago, actually, not this past week, the week before. And it dominated the headlines. He is in custody right now. He's actually trying to make an application, has attempted an application for bail today so that he'll be out of custody, and before Wednesday, where that was actually the ruling as of Friday. But this was what he said, and this is what landed him in trouble and caught the attention of the country and the media.
Mimi niliona juzi Waziri CS Matiang'i akisema amedeport wa China wa 6. Mimi nataka nimwambie leo, sisi hatuongei juu ya wa Chinese wa 6. Sisi tunaongea juu ya mamia ya watu wametoka nchi za nje wanakuja kufanya kazi hapa. Na mimi nataka niseme leo, mimi napea serikali masaa 24. Kama hao watu watakuwa wamerudi kwao, mimi kama mjumbe wa hapa, tutaingia kwa hizo maduka wanafanyia kazi. Tutaingia kwa hizo maduka wanafanyia kazi. Sisi tutawatoa, tutawapiga na tutawapeleka airport. Kazi ya Matiang'i na Department ya Migration, kazi yao itakuwa ya kuwachukua airport na kuwapeleka kwao mahali wametoka.
So this first surfaced on social media, but then it picked up steam and momentum and made its way to mainstream media. Would you advise against airing such sentiments on a national television station, or even repeating the same on national paper? I'll start with you, Gashie.
Yeah. Let me put it this way, that the media has a right to print and broadcast, but with a disclaimer. It is very important, because that is a dangerous person, and he's engaging in what we call incitement. He's engaging in populism, but also bordering on asking people to take law into their own hands and cause actual bodily harm. And I do not think this country, in terms of its internal relations, and even relations with neighboring countries, we are not in the business of inciting. Listen, our Constitution, section, I think it says, Article 34 and 5, that has media freedom and freedom of expression, has very clear, limitations to freedom of speech, and one of them is to guard against engaging in hate speech. But even prior to hate speech is what we call dangerous speech. There is also, prior to dangerous speech, there is what we call offensive speech. And prior to that, and it's categorized.
Yes.
And what the Honourable Member of Parliament indeed was saying, he was engaging in the latter, the most dangerous one, hate speech.
Yes. And then...
And therefore then, in retrospect, then he was in complete violation of our constitution here. Purportedly in defending his so-called constituents. He was in breach of the Kenyan constitution in itself, calling for people to take law into their own hands and then leading to xenophobia. Now, that in itself is extremely dangerous because xenophobia can also be acted or followed on against Kenyans in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Europe.
Right.
And indeed, what is good for the, I think there's a saying, call it
goose.
the goose
for the goose is also good for
the gander. And in this one, that was at the height of responsibility. Now, for the media to highlight this is then with a disclaimer that you're doing this in the public interest.
But then someone might say we are still fanning the flames if we play, for instance, reporting hate speech, reporting, tribal sentiments, tribalistic sentiments, negative. Then we're engaging in the same. We're multiplying the effect. What would you say? What would you tell your students?
Well, first I would have published the story, no doubt.
Even the bite, just
exactly. Yeah. Mainly to expose the MP
for what he is.
For what he's doing, and precipitate, action from the authorities.
Okay.
You expose what he's doing partly because he's committing an offense.
Okay.
So it's like catching a thief in the act. You want the CCTV to be available to police networks. So I would have used to expose him first. But secondly, I think what Jaguar is doing is that is alias, his Jaguar, the car, is that he's also trying scapegoating. So when it goes to a neighborhood that's deprived, where joblessness is high, he is trying to exonerate his own responsibility to his own constituencies, to his own constituents.
Yes.
So by saying,
we'll weed them out, whatever it is.
We'll weed them out. I mean, these are people who've created opportunities for themselves.
Right.
They didn't get jobs from the county or from the CDF or from a government institution. It is another human being trying to eke out a living somewhere. So he's just a symptom, I think, of a larger national malaise that we are not able to address our social and economic problems. So it's easy to finger others. Remember, in 2007, we had indigenous Kenyans pointing at other Kenyans. So again, our history is very instructive, that we don't seem to be learning from history. So what we're simply doing is substituting race for ethnicity.
And this is how it's playing out now. You've mentioned xenophobia, and this is what we actually are trying to address in terms of the effect. This is how it was addressed and responded to partly in the Tanzanian parliament in this previous week, soon after now Jaguar's sentiments went out and were really going viral.
Matamshi yale yametamkwa na mbunge huko mtaani. Naona kama serikali kumjibu kama tunampa hadhi vile. Sijui mnavyoshauri wenzangu, lakini kwa nadhani yani alitakiwa apate wabunge wasema hovyo tu wamjibu yule.
Na sidhani kama tuna sababu ya kupuuza kwa sababu ni mbunge amezungumza mtaani. Mimi ningeshauri Mheshimiwa Spika, bunge hili litoe kauli ya kukemea na kulaani kauli ile, na kauli ya bunge letu itambue kwamba hatuna ugomvi na Jamhuri ya Kenya na wananchi wa Kenya na serikali ya Kenya.
That was a very diplomatic response for that Mheshimiwa in Tanzania, but there was another one that we didn't quite cut out, and it was very harsh. And in short, to paraphrase, he said, let's not beat around the bush on this one. Let's also kick them out. Tuwapige, tuwafurushe. Tuwatoe hapa. Wale wa Kenya ambao wanafanya kazi hapa, tuwapige na tuwafurushe. And that's what we fear could be the effect of the continued telling of this particular story without the caution.
Yeah, you see, Mheshimiwa here was engaging in what we call pure scapegoating, passing the buck.
Yes.
And you see, it's a very dangerous thing when you pass the buck without to try the easier way out, without knowing the immediate impact of the same, because it can also be applied, in equal measure elsewhere. And I think that's the danger then of allowing a senior public or public official to engage in that, because this time it will be Tanzania, tomorrow it will be short people, tomorrow it will be tall people, tomorrow it will be dark brown, wherever.
God forbid, bald people.
And I think, and bald
there,
people and what have you.
Yeah.
And therefore we are engaging in what we call profiling. And I think our constitution is quite very clear about discrimination in terms of race, color, and what have you. But perhaps what my colleague is saying is that if there are Tanzanians here, the failure is not the Tanzanian. The failure is the Kenyan system that has not controlled that.
Yes.
And you cannot pass the buck, as it were. So, because there are labor laws in this country. Remember, Kenya is also part of the larger East African community that has been talking about free movement of labor and people.
Yeah.
And you cannot, therefore, as party to the East African Community Treaty, right, penalize, Tanzanians for having been here. Otherwise, then you are repudiating the entire East African Freedom of Movement Treaty, which Kenya is, a party. Now, in the same vein, I think we cannot engage in populism to the point of saying that we will go and take law into our own hands,
yes,
and that we shall do that without any care, because that is extremely, unacceptable. And the media needed to call him or anybody of that ilk in this country, at whatever level, and especially hate speech. Again, also, and hate speech and xenophobia has also 4 classifications. Perhaps the lawyers will tell you, but it also depends on the person. And this is a leader. And he is asking his people to take law into their own hands, justifying throw away. That is extremely dangerous. And as again my colleague said, Kenya has been through that. Indeed, 2017, right?
Yeah.
It's less than
207,
right? We had issues going on in Mathare, in Mukuru kwa Jenga, and what have you. Now, next time it will be then people who don't drive a car, or people then who have a bicycle, because you can easily say that they are taking our jobs anyway.
Yes.
And therefore, I think the media on that, and in that incident, what I do not know is whether they called him out for what he was.
Right.
Because you have to call him for what he was.
Yes, and then there is the aspect in terms of, after calling him for what he is and the actions thereof in terms of hate speech, there is the issue of the conversation that needs to be had in terms of if there are foreigners who are trading illegally within our city. And this was actually responded to in Parliament by Majority Leader Eden Duale, and I believe we have that bite ready. We could hear that. And whilst he did say Charles Njagwa didn't go right about this, this is a conversation that we do need to have, and we could play it if we have it ready to the director.
And we are here, we must protect. We will not involve ourselves in hate speech, but this House must discuss. Kenya is not a dumping ground. We must discuss that. Kenyans' top professionals are not getting jobs in Tanzania. And I'll give an example. Vodafone International appointed Sylvia Mulinge as the head of Vodafone Tanzania. And the president and the government of Tanzania refused her.
So how do we shape this conversation? It needs to be had, but it's very emotive.
Yeah.
And the quick sentiments that can be carried is wafurushe, watoe hapa. But how do we then shape the agenda on this particular one?
Well, Kenya and Tanzania have had very interesting dynamics. So again, history is very interesting, because in the 60s, Kenya turned to the west, Tanzania turned to the east. So so during the height of the Cold War. And you had South Africans, Southern African states that were being supported by Tanzania for full liberation because Nyerere was very Pan-Africanist. Kenyatta similarly was very Pan-Africanist when he was abroad in Europe and afterwards when he became a national icon. So, but the tensions still linger that South African investors to date have a free hand. I did a story, I think, in 2004. It was on the East African Cooperation, the integration campaign. And looking at what were the obstacles that the three states were facing. And we found those historical strictures were very, very, very fortified, that despite the East African community being formed and pushed through the decades, things were not shifting at all. So what we need to know is, Tanzania as a neighbor, we are connected for the rest of our lives. And I think, this media house has invested in Tanzania, in Uganda as well.
Yes.
And on some occasion, Kenyan journalists were actually deported from Tanzania.
Yes.
So what I'm driving toward is, how can we have a conversation that does not stigmatize anybody, but allow us to examine what are the policies that you have driven that could be perpetuating these disproportionate, labor pools or labor trends? Because let's face it, there are people who come to the airport, get a tourist visa, come and masquerade in this country for years to be expatriates on tourist visas. I mean, I think I could be right that Matiang'i, when Matiang'i started the campaign to verify who is in town, was a very timely intervention.
Yes.
But we are not looking at what's also pushing this agenda. Europe, North Americans all secure their visas at the airport. So when Douala is talking about this is not a dumping ground, we are more than that. Aikwe Amar, the Ghanaian writer, said, "We are worse than a pit latrine. We can't refuse even dysentery." Wow. That's how crude it is. We have not earned our neighbors' respect because you haven't fully respected our own citizens. So Kenyans are out there, trying to earn a living because they can't get jobs, because expatriates on tourist visas are in this town.
Right.
Yeah.
Besides calling the leaders out when they have such strong sentiments out that should be discouraged, like the Starehe Member of Parliament, what else would you do in shaping this conversation that is necessary?
For me, it's one also to draw the attention, the failure of the Kenyan systems to, monitor and, police the issuance, therefore, of free labor movement and, work permits and what have you. Indeed, it's one of the most important growth area in the world, about dumping, about free movement of labor and services and what have you.
Yeah.
And I think what we're having in Europe now, the growth of extreme right-wing groups, it is also based on the feeling that they're under siege. And likewise, I think Kenya, in its relationship with its East African community, member countries, has to be very careful as to how it goes about this. And I think the foreign relations angle, the legal angle about people coming to Kenya and having work permits or issuance there for visas, and how the visa protocols are applied. And remember also too that Kenya is one of the countries in the region that has one of the fastest growing diaspora. And remember, I think all you have to do is to go to South Sudan, go to Rwanda, go to Tanzania, go to Somalia, go to Uganda. Indeed, even go to South Africa, go to Zimbabwe, go to Namibia and Lesotho. We have, in many ways, one of the fastest and fairly trained manpower. So remember that it could also cut both ways.
Yeah.
And therefore, people in glass houses should not throw stones. What am I saying? In this regard, we need to call it for what it is. That we must be able to figure out that this market in Kenya will be infiltrated. Indeed, the lower segmentation of employment, if we opened it up, will even exacerbate the unemployment. But at the middle sector level, all you have to do is to go to South Africa, really, Botswana and Lesotho, and you'll find many, many highly trained Kenyans out there. Could it be reversed or be retroactive? In Tanzania, and as you say, Tanzania and Kenya have what we call a hate-love relationship. I think it's both a bromance, isn't it? At times, it's a man-eat-man society, and Kenyans had this fantastic retort that Tanzania is, eat-nothing society.
Man-eat-nothing
society. Man-eat-nothing society.
Yeah.
So you notice that. But also note that Tanzania is still one of Kenya's largest market. Don't forget that. Export market. I think the biggest export market for Kenyan products right now is Uganda, and Tanzania is close behind.
Yeah.
And again, if you remember the growth of public investment in Kenya, the Kenyan elite, the Kenyan investors, they're doing a lot. And what you again referred to, the problem of Kenya and Tanzania over the manner in which the South African capital was using Tanzania as a launch pad to dominate the Kenyan market.
Yes.
And if you remember the beer wars, do you remember the Castle and Tusker and Kenya breweries therefore and South African breweries?
Yeah.
And that was a standstill.
Yeah.
As of now, I think it was won by Kenya breweries for a while.
Castle were driven out of town.
Castle were driven out of town.
Yeah.
South African Airways was to a large extent again driven out of town. And remember, we have APSA, Barclays, again, remember. And if you go to the academia, there are very interesting dynamics between the Kenyan academia and the South Africa. So Kenya being a regional hub, and let's put it in context, that Kenya is the most advanced economy in Africa outside mineral-based. You have to understand that. South Africa is mineral-based. Nigeria is energy-based. Egypt and Morocco are mineral-based. Kenya, and this is where a lot of people don't seem to appreciate that, Kenya is the fifth, perhaps largest, possibly fifth, sixth largest economy in Africa, but there is no oil. At least the Turkana oil has as yet to be felt.
Yes. Yeah.
So in terms of that, Kenya is still an anchor country. It's a very powerful player in the region. So we are a hegemon in this region, and we must also be able not to throw away too much again.
Right.
Safaricom is a behemoth, really.
Yes.
So we have to be very careful. And the nation too.
Yes. And on that note, you've actually mentioned Safaricom. I believe you echo the sentiments that, we do send our condolences to the family of Bob Collymore. And indeed, that's why the show started late, because we had a show for tributes to his life and, of course, the company that he worked for and that he built. May he rest in peace. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I'd have to wrap it up here and at this point. And it's unfortunate Wayu Amuli could not join us. She was caught up with other meetings. But I'm sure she would love to join us for other conversations. You can chime into this really briefly as a wind up. This is the international radar, something that we like to wind up on, but still with a feel on the industry. Now, as you can see, or you will be seeing right now, that is Donald Trump, the United States president. Well, He seems to have defended Saudi Arabia's murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi by saying Iran killed people too. And this, of course, was at a press briefing. President Donald Trump doubled down on his defense of Saudi Arabia in the aftermath of the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi last year, arguing that Iran and other countries kill people too. And this is quoted here, and this is by Newsweek. Iran's killed many people a day. Other countries in the Middle East, this is a hostile place. This is a vicious, hostile place. Arabia. Continuing his defense of the kingdom, the president reiterated that Riyadh spends a significant weapons and products. And I'm sure as you nod very briefly, you can understand and give a context to this particular response by the U.S. president and not defending, or sending the FBI to look into the killing of this journalist.
Well, I think countries' interests come first, and the countries' interest in many instances are not guided by morals, really. It's to a large extent guided by the conduct of international relations. Has nothing to do with morality, really.
Wow.
Anybody who tells you that there's a moral high ground is
and expectation.
Expectation is that it's really the country first, strategically, economically, and what have you.
Yes.
And I think what Trump is saying, he's just saying that we will continue doing that in any case. But he's passing the buck because the relationship between America and Saudi Arabia are critical.
Right, and he even even the quotation of $400 to $450 billion over a period of time, all the money, all the jobs, buying equipment, still just stating the economic interests of the United States, overriding the moral standards, even though it involves a journalist's life here and actually speaks a lot to the profession internationally. And something else that we can actually draw into this particular conversation that we were having earlier about Tanzania, Kenya, would at any point Kenya's interests come first in the conversations that we have? In conclusion.
Well, for me, Trump simply echoes, or he simply extends his illogical explanations to things. Okay. I mean, he doesn't have to appreciate universality of human life, yes, for instance, as sacred, and one can say even press freedoms to him are things you can negotiate, right? Like cargo.
Yeah, he's labeled news. He's labeled news a lot. Fake news.
Like sausages.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, and he loves sausages actually.
Yes. Real quick conclusion.
Yeah. So I don't think the state media relations in Kenya have been tested in those terms.
Okay.
But we have definitely had occasion where national security perhaps, yes, might prevent journalists from reporting certain events,
right,
or writing certain perspectives,
right,
and they leave that to other media in the world.
Well, let's hope our work will not be curtailed in Tanzania. The Nation Media Group has a lot of presence there, as well as other media houses within the nation. And yes, as has been shared, I really appreciate your sentiments. These gentlemen, my seniors, were here as colleagues when I was in primary school, and this is in the 90s, and I appreciate your wisdom and calling us out for what we do, and now sharing it to the profession and even the audience. Again, apologies from Wayu Amuli, who was not able to join us. Thank you for your time. Have yourself a good night.